Mexico and more than 26,000 Canadians are trapped inside. On Sunday, the Mexican military killed the most powerful drug lord on the continent. His cartel responded by sending businesses smashed, flights canceled, became the primary supplier of methamphetamine and cocaine into the United States and Canada. The DEA considers
Sí, señora. Sí. Allá está el otro, en el otro lado.
In February 2025, the Trump administration designated CJNG a foreign terrorist organization. The first time in history a Mexican cartel received that label. This was not a man running from the law. This was a man who shot down military helicopters, who launched drone strikes on rival positions, who tried to assassinate the chief of police of Mexico City with grenades and high-powered rifles in broad daylight. For years, El Mencho operated as a ghost. No recent photographs, no public appearances, a shadow running a multi-billion-dollar machine across 90 franchise organizations in at least 21 Mexican states. Mexico's Air Force and National Guard Special Reaction Force launched the operation. The firefight was brutal. Cartel members fired back with rocket launchers and armored vehicles. 4 were killed on site. 3 more, including El Mencho, were wounded and died during transport. The Mexican Defense Ministry confirmed the kill. The White House confirmed American intelligence support. A U.S. defense official told CBS News the military participated through the Joint Interagency Task Force, Counter Cartel. This was the biggest blow to organized crime in Mexico since the capture of El Chapo. But here is what everyone who celebrated should have anticipated. The cartel did not collapse, it detonated.
I am monitoring the serious and rapidly evolving security situation in various regions of Mexico, in particular the Jalisco state, including Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta, Guerrero state, including Acapulco, Michoacan state, Sinaloa, including Mazatlan, Quintana Roo, including Cancun, Baja California, including Tijuana and Tecate, Nayarit. I am in contact with my Mexican counterpart, who expects the situation to normalize in the coming days. Our ambassador and consular staff are working with their counterparts to ensure that Canadians remain safe.
Within hours of El Mencho's death, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel launched a coordinated campaign of retaliation across the country. 252 roadblocks in 20 states, burning vehicles on highways, businesses set ablaze, gunfire in city streets. In Jalisco alone, 25 members of the National Guard were killed in 6 separate attacks. More than 30 cartel operatives died. By Monday afternoon, the confirmed death toll had reached at least 73 security forces, suspected cartel fighters, and civilians caught in between. Guadalajara, the second largest city in Mexico, a host city for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, was turned into a ghost town. Schools canceled across multiple states. The governor of Jalisco activated a code red, the highest state of emergency. And Puerto Vallarta, one of the most popular tourist destinations in the Western Hemisphere, was placed under a shelter-in-place order. Flights grounded, taxis suspended, ride shares shut down. smoke rising over beachfront hotels, and inside those hotels, thousands of Canadians.
As of 7 o'clock this morning, 26,305 Canadians in Mexico have registered with Global Affairs Canada. That is an increase of nearly 8,000 from the same time yesterday. Registration is voluntary. We know that the actual number of Canadians in Mexico is likely much higher. In the last 24 hours, Canada's Emergency Watch and Response Centre has received 440 calls from Canadians who are seeking information about flights and travel advisories.
26,305. That is the number of Canadians who registered with Global Affairs. The real number is almost certainly far higher because registration is voluntary. These are not diplomats. These are not aid workers. These are families on vacation, retirees, snowbirds escaping February, people who booked flights to paradise and landed in a crisis zone. Air Canada canceled all flights to and from Puerto Vallarta. WestJet diverted 7 planes midair and canceled 37 flights across 3 Mexican cities. Air Transat, Porter, Flair, all grounded. At the Puerto Vallarta airport, a Winnipeg couple described hearing gunshots outside the terminal. Passengers dove behind luggage conveyors. Airport staff moved hundreds of people to the second floor while armed military stood guard at the entrance. A woman from Calgary said she was walking distance from the airport and had no idea when she would get home. A man from Edmonton, who has been visiting Puerto Vallarta since the early 90s, said he was watching history unfold from his hotel window. 3 consular cases were reported. 2 Canadians with non-life-threatening injuries. 1 requesting financial assistance. That is the official count. But the real story is not in the consular numbers. The real story is in a single question asked at that press conference and in the answer that followed.
Given the number of Canadians that were there, were you given any warning that this security operation was going to take place?
I was not provided with any indication that this particular operation would be taking place. And on my understanding, I believe that the Government of Canada was not provided with indication that it was going to occur.
Let that sink in. The United States provided intelligence for the operation. American military assets participated through Northern Command. Washington knew. Washington helped plan it. And Canada, with over 26,000 citizens in the blast radius, was told nothing. Not a warning, not a courtesy call, not a quiet diplomatic heads up to prepare evacuation corridors or reposition consular staff. Nothing. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada learned about a military operation that would endanger tens of thousands of her citizens after it had already happened. This is not a failure of Mexico. Mexico ran a sovereign military operation on its own territory. This is a failure of positioning. Canada was not at the table where the intelligence was shared. Canada was not in the room where the risks were assessed. Canada was, once again, on the outside, reacting instead of anticipating. And when the crisis hit, what did Ottawa offer?
Are you considering recreation flights? Are you considering sending in planes?
Not at this time.
What about the use of the military? I know that's sometimes lined up weeks in advance.
Not at this time.
Not at this time. 4 words. No repatriation flights, no military deployment, no planes. The Mexican government did not request assistance, and Canada did not push. The official position was clear. Mexico considers this a domestic matter. Canada's role is to provide information and wait. The minister announced that Global Affairs was preparing a plan to assist, but declined to provide any details about what that plan might involve. Meanwhile, the ROA registration system, the very system Ottawa was urging Canadians to use, experienced technical failures during the first critical hours of the crisis. It was eventually restored, but the damage was already done. At the exact moment Canadians needed their government most, the infrastructure buckled, and this points to a deeper problem, one that goes beyond logistics. The killing of El Mencho was, by every tactical measure, a success. The most wanted drug lord on the continent is dead. The operation was precise, coordinated, and executed under extreme conditions. But strategy and tactics are not the same thing. Mexico's own president, Claudia Sheinbaum, had previously criticized the so-called kingpin strategy, the approach of targeting cartel leaders, precisely because of what happens next. When you cut the head off a hydra, you do not get a dead hydra. You get chaos. The former chief of international operations at the DEA said it plainly. Killing the head of the cartel will not have a major impact unless you go after the infrastructure, the logistics, the money laundering, the armed wings, and you have to do it fast, because if you don't, there will be hell to pay in terms of violence. That is exactly what happened. CJNG is not a traditional hierarchy. It operates as a franchise, 90 affiliated organizations spread across Mexico and beyond. Analysts are now pointing to two scenarios. The first, El Mencho appointed a successor, possibly his stepson, Juan Carlos Gonzalez Valencia. In that case, the cartel regroups and the violence subsides temporarily. The second, no clear successor emerges and the cartel fragments. Factions compete for territory, supply routes, and control. In that scenario, the violence does not end. It multiplies, and it spreads. For Canada, neither scenario is reassuring. CJNG does not only traffic drugs to the United States, it traffics to Canada, Australia, and dozens of countries across 4 continents. It controls the port of Manzanillo, a gateway for precursor chemicals used to manufacture fentanyl. Its operations have fueled the overdose crisis that has devastated Canadian communities from Vancouver to Halifax. And every year, hundreds of thousands of Canadians fly to the very regions where this cartel operates: Jalisco, Quintana Roo, Baja California, Nayarit, for vacations, for weddings, for retirement. The assumption has always been that the tourist zones are safe, that the violence stays in the mountains, in the rural areas, in someone else's neighborhood. Puerto Vallarta shattered that illusion in a single afternoon. The minister stood at the podium and warned about misinformation on social media. She said people were absorbing content that does not reflect the true security situation on the ground. And she is right. Disinformation is a real problem. But the most dangerous misinformation was not a tweet. It was the belief, held by tens of thousands of Canadian travelers, that flying into cartel territory during a period of escalating tensions between Washington and Mexico's criminal organizations carried no risk. No one told them otherwise, not before they booked, not before they boarded, and not before the bullets started flying. Canada did not cause this crisis, but Canada was not prepared for it either. The difference between monitoring a situation and controlling a situation is the difference between watching a fire and having a fire plan. Ottawa monitored. It issued advisories. It updated travel warnings after the violence had already begun. It encouraged registration after the system had already crashed. It promised a plan without revealing what that plan contained. 26,000 Canadians registered. The true number is higher. The flights are grounded. The roads are blocked. And the answer from the government is not at this time. Canada does not lack the resources to protect its citizens abroad. It lacks the reflex. It lacks the systems that activate before the crisis, not after. It lacks the intelligence sharing relationships that would have placed it in the room when this operation was being planned. And it lacks the political will to say what every Canadian stranded in a Puerto Vallarta hotel room already knows. Not at this time is not a strategy. It is a confession. The next time a crisis catches Canadians abroad, and there will be a next time, the question will not be whether Ottawa cared. The question will be whether Ottawa was ready. Based on what we saw this week, the answer is no. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what is happening, subscribe to the channel and share this video. It helps more than you think. Stay informed, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.